I remember the exact second my life split in two. It was a Tuesday night, quiet except for the hum of the fridge and the soft buzz of my phone on the nightstand. Jessica was in the shower. I was supposed to be placing an order for takeout. Instead, I noticed her phone light up with a message banner that said, "Can't wait to see you again. Same place?" There was a heart at the end. My stomach went cold. Jessica was hiding something. Before we get into what happened, I'd love to know where you're all listening from today. Drop your city in the comments below. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe a friend, maybe a joke, maybe an old thread she forgot to mute. But my hands were already picking up her phone. I had never been the guy who checked a partner's phone. My dad, James, taught me to trust first and deal with problems when they show themselves. But something had been wrong for weeks. Jessica suddenly guarded her phone like it was a safe full of state secrets. Late nights at work. Quick showers with the door locked. Smiles that didn't reach her eyes. I opened the messages and there it was, a thread with a guy named Daniel Hayes. It was full of cute nicknames Jessica used to save for me. Promises, late-night pictures that were not for me, and plans for next time. The words shone like shattered glass under a harsh light, beautiful on the surface, but sharp enough to cut. Everything I thought I had. Our future apartment with a tiny porch, a dog named Scout, Sunday pancakes, fell apart in a breath. I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. I sat there and let the truth slice away every soft lie I had told myself. The love I thought was breathing died right there, in the cold glow of a screen. And in that space, something else started to grow, quiet, cold, and precise. Not a fire, a blade. If pain was the doorway, I had just stepped through. My name is Michael Reed. I grew up in a small Ohio town where everybody knows your last name and where your car is parked on a Sunday. My mom, Linda, worked double shifts at the hospital. My dad, James, fixed anything with a motor and a soul. They didn't preach love. They demonstrated it. My parents argued like humans, but they showed up for each other every single day. No grand speeches required. I thought that was normal. I thought love meant consistency. I met Jessica in a coffee shop after she spilled a latte on my old laptop and apologized like her life depended on it. She laughed at herself and I loved that. We fell fast but not reckless. After 2 years, we moved into a small apartment with thin walls and a view of a brick alley. We made it feel bigger with string lights and houseplants we tried not to kill. She talked about a boutique business idea, and I believed in her because I believed in us. I put aside money little by little for our future. First a better apartment, then maybe a house, maybe a wedding on a beach with bad speakers and great vows. Jessica had a way of making me feel like I could be more than I was. When she said we should invest in an online shop together, I listened. When she said we were a team, I said yes. I kept showing up. I kept trusting. That was my nature. Steady, patient, maybe a little naive. People like me don't look for lies. We build plans. We keep the lights on. We think everyone else is playing by the same rules. So when I found those messages, it wasn't only my heart that broke. It was the shape of my whole life. The map I had used for years, get up, work hard, build something good, no longer matched the terrain. I wasn't just hurt. I was disoriented. And under the pain, a thin line of clarity formed. I realized I had been mistaking comfort for truth. That mistake would end now. Finding the messages was a wound. What came next was a fracture. The morning after, I confronted Jessica at the kitchen counter. She stared at the tile, then at me, then tried to smile like this was a misunderstanding. She called Daniel an old friend, said their messages were innocent flirting, said she was lonely because I'd been distant, and I almost laughed at how fast she spun the wheel. I asked to see the rest of her messages. She said I was being controlling. She started crying. I didn't raise my voice. I just said, "Who is he?" She would not say his last name. Later that day, I sat with our shared bank statements and something far worse appeared. Months earlier, Jessica had pitched the online boutique again and asked me to help. She said she needed inventory money, site design, and marketing. I moved $120,000 from my savings into our joint account to fund it. The line items were supposed to be suppliers and ad buys. Instead, I saw transfers to accounts I didn't recognize and a domain sale that made no sense. The boutique's website, which Jessica promised was almost live, now redirected to a dead page. The inventory was a ghost. The name D. Hayes floated in a note next to one transfer. My chest went cold. It wasn't just cheating. It was a scheme. The person she was whispering to at night was the same person receiving our money by day. I felt the room tilt. This wasn't a broken promise. It was a pattern of theft and lies. This was the part of the movie where the main character realizes the monster lives inside the house. I thought about calling the police. I thought about yelling. But yelling doesn't return money. Rage doesn't fix a ledger. So I made a rule. No big moves until I know everything. I copied the statements, pulled email records, and exported every message thread I could legally access. If truth was merciless, then I would be too, but clean, quiet, and exact. Anger has a sound. The buzz in your ears when your body prepares for a fight. The tightness in your throat when words stack up behind your tongue. For a few nights, I could not sleep. I replayed every moment with Jessica and asked myself when the first lie had crawled into our bed. Was it that late meeting? That new perfume? The sudden girls' trip? That wasn't on the calendar? I hated how my mind scavenged the past for clues. I hated that I could not trust my own memory. Friends tried to help. My buddy Chris said, "Man, just leave. It's not worth your peace." My sister Amanda said, "You don't have to prove anything to anyone." Good advice, maybe. But advice is cheap when you have $120,000 missing and your name on accounts that don't add up. I felt smaller than I'd ever felt in my life. I felt like a fool who walked into a con with a smile on his face. Shame is heavy. It makes you hunch. I asked myself harder questions. Who am I if I let this go? Who am I if I rage and lose myself? What do I want? Revenge or restoration? The honest answer was both. I wanted the money back. I wanted my name clean. I wanted the lie to end, loudly and permanently. But a different voice, the part of me that still sounded like my dad, said, "Slow down, document, build a case, don't swing wild." So I made coffee, opened a new notebook, and wrote 3 lines. Record everything. Say little. Move clean. I scheduled a quiet consult with a lawyer named Rachel Flores, who specialized in fraud. I did not tell Jessica. I learned new words. Discovery, deposition, injunctive relief. I organized files until my desktop looked like a small war room. The anger did not go away. It changed shape. It went from wild to focused. If pain was my doorway to clarity, discipline was the lock I turned. The first win came like a tiny light in a long tunnel. I found an archived snapshot of the boutique site through a public web archive. The page listed suppliers and product codes. I emailed one supplier pretending to be a nervous investor who needed to confirm purchase orders. A man named Mark replied with invoices that showed a buyer of record, Hayes and Willow Trading. Hayes, there it was again. I dug deeper and found a coffee shop near my office where Daniel's business profile showed a few check-ins on social media. It was a risk, but I set up a meeting under the guise of a partnership referral. Tuesday morning, foggy and quiet, I sat in the corner with my back to the wall. Daniel walked in wearing a crisp jacket and a watch that wanted to be noticed. He smiled like he knew how this would go. He didn't. I kept my voice calm and my questions boring. I asked about domain flipping, supplier relationships, inventory financing. He talked. Some men cannot resist hearing themselves invent. He bragged about selling a domain that sounded like our boutique's old URL. He said moving money through holding accounts was just smart. He never said Jessica's name, but he didn't have to. I had enough to connect him. I recorded our conversation legally. My state allows single-party consent, and left with a voice memo that wasn't a confession, but it was pure arrogance on tape. I sent it to Rachel. She said, "Not a smoking gun, but a heater." I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. I took a long shower that night and let the hot water run until the mirror fogged. I allowed myself a small smile. Then the blow landed. 2 days later, A sheriff's deputy handed me papers at my door. Jessica filed for a temporary restraining order, claiming I was unpredictable and threatening, and that I had stolen her phone. My hands shook as I read the lies. The narrative had flipped. I was the problem now. My tiny light flickered, but I didn't panic. I put the papers in my war room folder and made another pot of coffee. The next phase had begun. Panic is a hot, messy feeling. What I felt holding those papers was the opposite. A cold, sharp fury. The lies were so brazen that I was erratic, that she was in fear for her safety. It was a calculated chess move to paint me as the villain in a story she had written. I called Rachel immediately, my voice tight with a rage I refused to let loose. She was unflappable. "It's a classic tactic, Michael," she explained, her tone cutting through my anger. "When you expose a fraud, their first move is to attack your character. Don't engage. Don't respond to her. We will do our talking in front of the judge." Her words were a lifeline, but the days leading up to the hearing were a special kind of hell. She had taken our private disaster and made it a public accusation. The chill in a courtroom is intentional, a fact I felt keenly as I sat on a wooden bench, listening to strangers reduce my life to sentences that didn't sound like me. Jessica arrived with a lawyer and a soft sweater and a face that looked practiced in sorrow. She said I was controlling. She said she feared I would retaliate. Her voice shook in all the right places. Some people in the room looked at me like I had already lost. I kept my hands folded and my voice steady. Rachel spoke for me with calm facts. My clean record, my evidence of financial irregularities, my single-party recording that showed no threats, just questions. The judge extended a narrow order, no contact outside legal counsel, while the case developed. It was not a win, not a loss, but it felt like a public stain. A gossip blog posted a cropped screenshot of a message thread, carefully edited to make me look obsessive. At work, a manager called me in just to check. My dad left a voicemail that tried to be strong but sounded scared. Isolation wrapped around me like a wet coat. Humiliation is loud in your head. Even when people are kind, you imagine what they wonder. Then came the worst news. A forensic glance at the accounts showed the $120,000 had been moved through a chain of shell companies. Tracing them would take time and money. Recovery was not guaranteed. The math hit me like a wall. Even if I won, I would still lose. I checked into a cheap motel for a few nights just to think in quiet. I stared at the ceiling and let myself cry hard. Not from pity, but from grief for a future that was never real. This was rock bottom. A cheap motel, silent except for my own breathing. I had lost nearly everything, but in that quiet, I found what was left. My name, my work, my stubbornness, and a folder full of facts. It was enough. I wiped my face, opened the laptop, and kept fighting. The next morning, I changed my approach. I stopped trying to win the story in people's minds and focused on winning it on paper. Rachel helped me outline a civil strategy. File for accounting, request bank records, depose Daniel, and subpoena registrar logs for the domain sale. No rants, no social media, no hallway arguments, just filings, timestamps, and signatures. I also took a long look at myself. I realized I had given Jessica more power than any one person should hold over my sense of self. That wasn't love, that was surrender. So I started taking back small pieces of my life. I canceled joint autopay accounts, opened a new bank account in my name only, and set up alerts on my credit. I took long runs at dawn even when my legs felt heavy. I cooked simple food. I called my sister and told her the truth without skipping the ugly parts. She said, "I'm here," and she meant it. That helped. At night, I read about fraud cases where people like me had won by being bored and relentless. I made checklists and timelines. I mapped the transfers like a puzzle. A pattern emerged. Money moved from our joint account to a marketing vendor, then to Hayes and Willow trading, then to a holding account used to buy a domain and a small property deeded to a trust. It wasn't clever. It was messy. Messy can be proven. I turned my anger into rituals. Every document scanned twice. Every email saved. Every call logged with date and time. I was still hurt, still raw, but I was not broken. Pain had pried me open. Clarity was rearranging what stayed inside. What used to be alive, a dream fixed to the wrong person, had ended. In the empty space, a new beginning formed, not romantic, but solid. I would become the kind of man who does not flinch, who makes truth the sharpest tool in the room. My rebellion wasn't loud. It was legal. We filed a civil complaint against Daniel Hayes and related entities, plus a claim against Jessica for conversion and fraud. The filing forced the first round of disclosures. We requested bank records, registrar logs, and correspondence with suppliers. Daniel's attorney tried to bury us in objections. Rachel smiled and filed motions to compel. I learned patience. I learned that the system can be slow, but slow is not the same as still. The deposition day came. We sat in a conference room. Jessica wore a blazer and a comm mask. Daniel looked bored. Rachel began with simple questions. Dates, transfers, who authorized what? Then she slid a printed transcript of my coffee shop recording across the table. Daniel glanced down and paused. It was less than 5 minutes of tape, but it captured his favorite habit, bragging. He'd mentioned the domain sale, the holding accounts, even laughed about creative bookkeeping. He tried to call it puffery. Rachel called it an admission against interest. The court reporter's fingers flew across the keys, creating a soft, persistent clicking that filled the silence. I watched Jessica's eyes. They didn't fill with tears this time. Instead, they narrowed with calculation. She realized, finally, that this would not be another smooth pivot. Paper does not care about your tone. Under pressure, she admitted authorizing transfers at Daniel's direction. She claimed she believed it was legitimate business movement. Maybe she did. Her signature was on the authorizations, ink that would not fade. We followed the funds line by line. Suppliers confirmed invoices that did not match shipments. The registrar confirmed the domain transfer price on the exact date our money moved. The pattern hardened. My rebellion had worked by being boring and exact. Somewhere in the middle of it, I stopped feeling like a victim. I felt like a man doing a hard job well. And for the first time, I saw something in Daniel I had been waiting to see. Nerves. Small but real. The blade inside me stayed sheathed, but I could feel its edge. The climax didn't look like a movie scene. It looked like a judge reading from a thick file. In court, the evidence lined up like railroad ties. The bank records showed transfers from our joint account to a so-called marketing vendor that had no employees, no ad purchases, and no tax filings. From there, the money moved to Hayes and Willow Trading, then to a trust that acquired a small property and paid for the domain purchase connected to the boutique's brand. The numbers matched the dates I had mapped. The amounts matched down to the dollar. $120,000 in, $120,000 out, broken into neat chunks that looked like someone trying not to be obvious and failing at it. Our forensic accountant, an older man whose calm, methodical voice made even the most complex transactions sound simple, walked the court through each link. He didn't dramatize. He just showed. Then Rachel played the recording. Daniel's voice filled the room. Casual, cocky, talking about moving money around and making a quick flip on a domain. He tried to object. The judge overruled. Jessica's testimony softened from sure to unsure. She admitted authorizations. She tried to say she trusted Daniel's advice. The judge asked a simple question. Did you disclose these transfers to your fiancée? Jessica's answer came out as a whisper. No. The order landed like a clean cut. The court froze the trust's property pending recovery. The registrar funds from the domain sale were traced and partially attached. A restitution plan set a timeline for repayment. It wasn't total victory. Legal fees would take a bite, and time would do the rest. But the core was intact. My name was cleared, the scheme was exposed, and accountability was on paper with a seal. I did not celebrate in the hall. I shook Rachel's hand. I called my dad. I took a long walk past the courthouse and let the fall breeze hit my face. The revenge wasn't fire. It was light. The truth had done the cutting. I just held it steady. Months later, I began to reclaim the space. I moved the bed to the other wall, painted the living room a clean white, and bought a plant I promised to keep alive, naming it Scout anyway. The restitution payments began to hit on schedule. Not all the money, not fast, but enough to breathe. The restraining order dissolved into a quiet dismissal once the civil case settled certain facts. The gossip died. People got bored. The truth doesn't trend, but it endures. I won't pretend I'm the same man. I am not. The version of me who believed love would protect itself is gone. In his place is someone both softer and harder. Softer toward people who are hurting and quiet about it. Harder about boundaries, money, and the word trust. I still believe in love. I just believe it needs proof over time, not just promises at night. I think about Jessica sometimes. Not with hate, with a careful distance. She chose shortcuts. She chose a man who loved angles more than honesty. That path always ends the same way. In rooms with cold chairs and someone typing the record. I hope she finds a different road. That's not my job anymore. I learned that pain can be a doorway to a brutal kind of clarity, forcing you to let go of the warm illusions that were only burning you slowly. The truth was a blade, and while it cut deep, the wound was clean, and it could finally heal. The story I thought I was living, the one built on her promises, is over. In its place is a new beginning, one I'm building with steady hands, hard facts, and a heart that finally knows the difference between comfort and honesty. I brewed coffee this morning and watched the light move across the counter. It was quiet, and in that quiet, I felt something I hadn't recognized in a long time. Not victory, not revenge, just peace. The truth doesn't trend, but it endures. Thanks for listening. If you're here for stories where the truth cuts deep, hit subscribe, like this video to help it reach more people, and answer this in the comments below. Would you fight, or would you walk away?